if you're not having a good experience, think about what you can do to change that rather than what you can impose on other people.
Distraction makers.
If Rule Zero is working for you and your group, that's great.
I couldn't be happier.
I am so glad that is the case.
This is not actually sarcastic. I think my voice just kind of sounds like this after a lot of cynical talk. But legitimately, I am very happy for you. I hope you have a great pod. I hope you have great games.
This video is not for you.
No, stop watching.
You can
watch for 30 seconds. It helps the retention rate.
Well,
and then after 30 seconds,
at this point, they're probably
great. Okay, you can leave now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we're going to talk about when Rule Zero does not work,
right?
And why it can potentially be creating more problems than it is solving.
Yeah. Before we start complaining a lot about Rule Zero. Please, if you like our videos, give us a little like and subscribe and tell us why we're wrong down in the comments.
All right, back to the video. So that Mill guy put up a video recently that was discussing Rule Zero. Great video. You should check it out.
Yeah.
And you could just sort of feel his frustration in the video a bit. And I think that many a Commander player has felt a similar level of frustration. And I think a lot of it comes from this idea of what Rule Zero is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of players approach Rule Zero in that they are attempting to use Rule Zero to shape the game in a direction that is what they prefer, right? They're saying, well, these are my Rule Zero criterias. This is what I am looking for in a game, and I want to shape the game to look more like that.
I will say there's also some people that they end up creating a Rule Zero that shapes the game in a way that they believe someone else might prefer. Like someone loses and they clearly seem upset by losing a particular way, and so you start to shape the rules around the table to not include that.
Right. Yeah, and so I think like introducing these sort of ideas is sort of again like you're attempting to alleviate some kind of problem that is going on in the group, but inadvertently you might be causing a different one, which is that for every compromise or every rule that you are bringing to the table, someone else is losing something.
Yeah,
and I think that the sort of the biggest issue there is usually the player who ends up being the one to lose what they're attempting to do and how they want to play the game. It's usually a player who is interested in doing things that might be particularly unpredictable. They might be maybe a vastly different play pattern than what's EDH players are used to experiencing.
Right.
Basically, the sort of subverting what you might think of as like the normal play pattern of what EDH is.
Right. I think like most Magic players that have played for a long enough period of time have probably heard of like Magic psychographics that Mark Rosewater talks about all the time. And if maybe you're not quite seeing this, try and imagine sitting at a table and every single person at that table is a different psychographic that you could view.
Talking about sort of the internal driving motivations of these players. Spike is motivated by competition, motivated by winning. Johnny's motivated by self-expression. Timmy is motivated by fun, I guess. And then the other one might be like Vorthos, or is Vorthos also the socializer?
I mean, it's probably lumped in with socializer.
Kind of lumped in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the other one might be, okay, I'm just here to enjoy the experience of playing the game, not necessarily the game itself.
And then there's Melvins, which are game design nerds.
Right. Can't forget Melvin.
So imagine every single person at that table is a different psychographic, and each one of them is motivated by a completely different part of the game. Like, what's a Rule Zero that you could make at that table that isn't going to take something away from what one of those people enjoys about the game, right? If you decide no infinite combos, right, then you might see the Johnny/Spike player be disappointed by that. Maybe the Johnny wanted to do some sort of crazy combo with these particular cards that isn't seen that commonly. Maybe the Spike player is like, well, I just really want to see how far I can push this deck in a competitive sort of a format. So no matter what, there has to be some sort of a compromise. And that's what Rule Zero ultimately ends up doing. Most of the time, Rule Zero ends up working because your play group probably is within a similar psychographic to what you are.
Or at least pretty close. Like, I don't think people necessarily fit perfectly into any of these categories.
Yeah. Everyone has little splashes of
fluidly
little bits.
move between them. But so I think ultimately what we're hitting on here with different types of sort of player psychographics, demographics, whatever, trying to play at the same table together, and sort of the tension that can be caused by trying to have this Rule Zero conversation and then getting into the game and having things become disappointing, or the game doesn't work out like Rule Zero you thought it would when you took these precautions. I think what we're sort of missing out on is two major things. One is that the rules themselves stop being the sort of arbiter. They stop being an impartial third party, and the rules start to become expressions of the players at the table. So you feel like something is being taken away from you by another player because they have chosen, hey, I don't want people to play infinite combos. You're like, well, now I can't play my favorite deck or something.
Right. You've taken away the thing that I enjoy about the game most, and now I cannot do that.
And the other thing that ends up coming out of this is that it becomes much more difficult to celebrate when other players are doing things that are really cool. Right. That is something that you see time and time again in games of CEDH, is that when somebody like goes off and does something really cool, everybody is like, yeah, they're countering them and trying to stop them from doing it. But if they like fight through it or have a really good play, everybody celebrates them.
Right. And I think the difference is like, I'll bring my Orvar deck to a table, and most of the time when I bring out Orvar, it's like a lot of people that are like groaning, or they're like, oh, even though my Orvar deck's not necessarily like super competitive. I guess it's kind of
tuned. Like Orvar,
he's already a strong commander.
He's a strong commander. Yeah.
Right. But most people groan in our play group. But if it were a CEDH, I think most people would just kind of be like, oh, okay, cool. Like,
Orvar.
Great. Yeah, cool.
Right. And so I think that the sort of moving target that gets created here is also what's so difficult to navigate, right? It's that like a lot of people's Rule Zeros I don't think are thought through in a particular meaningful way. It's more like, I had a bad experience with this thing once, and I've decided I never want to play against it again. And you're sort of, it's very reactionary, right? It's like, okay, this thing happened. I don't like it. I never want to experience it again. Therefore, my Rule Zero is no stacks pieces. My Rule Zero is no infinite combos, or whatever these sort of salty cards are, or salty experiences.
Usually it ends up being like someone's sort of vague idea of what they consider to be too good of a card, right? So it's like, oh, well, no, you can't use Mana Crypt. That's too strong. Or you can't use this card. So some people have made like a whole point system. What's Canadian Highlander?
Yeah, Canadian Highlander uses a point system, but that's like an actual third party, like pointing, like putting points on the cards based on, I think they're legitimately their power level, and they're collecting data to make those choices, right?
I think it's funny because like we've had a couple videos that we've criticized like CEDH as like a format, and we talked about some of the holes.
Sure.
And yet, I mean, we were talking just before starting this, and I had the realization that like CEDH is actually just EDH, when EDH is almost always someone else's Rule Zero of what EDH really is. CEDH is the actual legitimate game that people are like, this is an eternal format. These are the legal cards we're going to be playing in our competitive way based off of the decks that we want.
And we're playing based on the intended motivation that the game has, which is that someone has to win.
It would be as if standard format was called competitive standard or standard.
Yeah.
And it's like, that doesn't make sense necessarily.
Yeah.
So really it's that you could say casual commander, and then you set, I guess, whatever the parameters of your Rule Zero is. I don't remember my point. I just thought that was a dumb thing to realize.
Yeah. I think another thing that is maybe not being noticed here, and what you end up losing because you're using Rule Zero, is that there is a joy in losing Magic. There's a joy in building a deck, winning through the means of the game, understanding the game better. I often liken this to player as protagonist is this thing that I bring up a lot in terms of game design, where when you are writing a protagonist in a story, a protagonist has wants and they have needs. And Best example here is like Finding Nemo. It's a really easy one. Marlin, Nemo's dad, what does he want to do? He wants to find Nemo. That's his want. But what he needs is to learn to trust other people. And so all of the things that he experiences along the way in that journey are ways that he learns to trust people better. Dory is a perfect example. Very challenging for him to trust this person. She's, her presentation is not particularly, I guess, presented as intelligent or whatever.
She's dumb. She has short-term memory loss.
Right. So has these sort of things where you're like, how can I possibly trust this person? And it's all misconception. And then by the end of the movie, we realize, he learns his lesson. That's a story. Okay.
Right.
So when we look at the wants and needs of a player as protagonist within Magic, the want is potentially, I want to have a good time. Or the want is, I want to win the game. Right?
Right.
I want my deck to do the thing. Right? These are wants. But I think under the surface, if you are using Rule 0 to curb the experience of learning the systems of Magic, of really understanding the game, you're robbing yourself of a deeper lesson in learning how to make better decisions with imperfect information.
I guess to me what's interesting is, we'll do a video soon talking about systems versus mechanics. We're kind of hashing out the details of how to discuss that. But maybe we could put up the graph.
Oh, we're going to do that now?
Well, not that we don't have to get super into the weeds of it, but mostly just pointing out like that we're pretty confident that rules of a game are basically, in a way, it's sort of the system of a game that is determined prior to you interacting at all with that game.
Sure.
Everyone before they play a game have to be able to sit down and agree that these are the parameters, this is the social contract with which we are playing this game. In a video game, that's not necessary because it's all hard coded. You can't change it.
To modify it. Yeah.
Right. But in a tabletop game, it's very important. In a game like Commander, or Magic, where you could take all these moving components and you could decide, I'm actually going to play this completely different game with them. Like that's out of the designer's hands, right? And I think what's interesting is that players have essentially widespread decided that the base rules of Commander are not rules that they are actually enjoying because they are adjusting those rules prior to playing in order to do what they believe is facilitating a better experience for the table as a whole.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. And like
probably just for themselves. But
sometimes it works, right?
The times when it works is when it lines up.
Right, when it lines up. And most of the time when it works, it also just ends up being a bunch of people that are getting a bunch of butter and then they just kind of blow up. Whatever. But I think that it's funny because it feels like we feel kind of crazy, I think, every time we talk about this because it doesn't feel like something that's talked about that often, and it feels like there's like two polar opposites to this, where it's either you're fully invested into your one pod that magically is working out, that you have all these different small granular rules, or you decide Canadian Highlander's the best way of playing, or whatever. You make whatever changes are necessary, and since then you're like, it's been great, no problems, pod is fantastic, we all get along, and it's totally great. Or you just get CEDH players that are like, I fucking love this is fantastic, we just want to kill each other like as soon as possible, and like everyone's fine with it. And then you get a lot of people in between that like kind of have these mixed experiences.
So I think part of what Rule 0 is attempting to do is maintain a stasis, right? You're trying to sort of put a bubble around your play group and say, I like how this is, I don't want it to change.
Yeah.
Or this is how I like things and I don't want them to change.
Yeah.
And Magic is a game about change. And the experience that you get to have growing from a player that doesn't know anything, that just bought a pre-con, to theoretically CEDH, if that's as far as you want to go, that experience, the whole breadth of that is amazing.
Yeah.
And if you decide, like, you can choose to stop whenever you want, but you can't make that choice for someone else.
Yeah.
And if you want to continue to play in the same group with those people, I think you have to be okay with them playing something that is outside of what you're okay playing.
And
right?
also just be okay with just deciding like, okay, well, I would rather not play with you guys than force you guys to play the way that I prefer to play. Or you adapt to the way that they're playing.
Right,
This is
adapt.
actually something I've been having to deal with the people that we often play, is like, I tend to not care about completely optimizing a lot of aspects of my deck.
Yeah.
But when playing with certain decks that have like higher power level, if you guys are generating resources faster, or you're getting to your win conditions a little bit faster, not on a CEDH level, but like it's definitely faster than what my decks are doing, then like I'm going to bump up my decks a little bit in order to accommodate that, because I want to still play the game.
Right.
But I just know it's not going to be fun if I'm just completely wiped out. So that's me actually having to sort of compromise what I naturally would do or naturally care about in order to interact with people in the group.
Sure, but that I think that's what's important, right? Is you're looking inward, right? You're looking inward to how to solve this problem.
Right.
You're not imposing that on anybody else.
Right.
And I think that what's also important here, and to make sure that you can invite people along with you if you are on this journey of sort of optimization, you let them proxy anything they want.
Yeah, yeah.
Just who cares, right? Don't worry about it, because even if you want to buy the cards, that's your decision. Do not put that burden on the rest of the play group.
Well, we should probably just have a whole episode on proxies.
That'll be a whole. I guess. Yeah. But really, I think bottom line is, especially if you're someone who wants to be playing more competitively, you're more competitive minded, you want to build decks that are optimized, and you want the rest of your group to come along with you. Who cares?
Right.
What's more important here? Being able to play, a meaningful, interesting game, or, showing off that you spent more money than everybody else at the table.
Right. Or even just that, like, you happen to beat everybody, right? Like, it's honestly why, recently I just made like a vanilla creatures deck. And I made it for the challenge of whether or not I could make a deck that even sort of functions well with that. Turned out actually way better than I thought.
Yeah,
I won my first game with it.
And how good does that feel?
It feels great.
It feels great.
I also don't feel like it's an incredibly overpowered deck.
Right.
It felt like a very fair, very simple deck. It's very dumb. You get a lot of creatures. You swing them at people. It didn't ramp up super quickly. Whatever. And like, I enjoyed that, and I would enjoy it whether it was like an amazing deck or not, but because that's my goal. My goal was I want to try and make this deck and bring it to the table and play with it, right? Like maybe, I wouldn't have as good of an experience if I brought it to a CEDH game, but like if I know I'm going to be going at a table with them, right, then I'm playing in their I'm not a spike player.
Right.
And I'm going to a spike table, I'm not going to be mad at them because they're not coming down to my level and what I care about in the game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really what it comes down to, right? Like, I mean, this was a little bit of a rant. I don't know. But I think to kind of sum it up here at the end, look inward, like if you're not having a good experience, think about what you can do to change that, rather than what you can impose on other people to change to try to shape the game in a way that you think is correct.
I only like Commander when I play against these colors with these people.
No blue.
Blue's unfair. I don't like half of the black cards either.
Well, the other half's okay though.
The other half is fine. Anything that discards, I don't like discarding. I think it's really dumb and unfair.
Right. It is meanie bobini. That's true.
It's super mean. Just a big butthead if you make me discard cards. Milling. I don't like milling.
Eldrazi's cool though, right? That's fine.
No, Eldrazi's not fair. That's not fair.
Not good.
Annihilator's not fair at all, so you can't play that. What else can't you play? You can turn the camera off. I'm just going to keep thinking about.
Going.
What else has not been fair? I know there's been plenty of things.
Kill spells? You like those are fine?
I think single target kill spells are okay.
Board wipes though.
I don't like board wipes aren't fair. You could play like one. Okay, if everyone at the table agrees they're only going to play like one board wipe max, and then just like hold on to the other ones. If it's like late in the game, I just don't want you to like play it.
Right.
It's just not going to be fun.
So you're just like down a card then. You just
you drew a dud that turn. Just like accept. Like maybe you shouldn't have put that in your deck.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That's a good point.
I think like you'll have more fun though.